And it looks like we are live. Good evening, everybody. Let's give us just a second here. Let the stream breathe. Get the Facebook groups in here because, as you always know, we love our Facebook supporters and everybody here in the wonderful Mile High Huddle community. So once we get green check marks, we will get started here. Looks like we're good to go. Mile High, hello, everybody. Broncos in Broncos country. Welcome into another episode of the Dove Valley Deep Divers podcast. I am your host, Lance Sanderson. Joining me, as per usual, my good friend and colleague. He is Mile High Huddle's senior NFL draft analyst, the one and only Erick Trickel. Erick, again, dog days of summer, man. How we doing? You hanging in there?
Yeah, I'm doing good. Just starting to get annoyed. I mean, the tourists are all really starting to show up now, and got a few more days before dip netting opens, which is when things get really crazy here.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, doing good. We finally got a break in from rain today, so I was able to go out and go for a 2-hour walk around town. So that was nice. But yeah, just getting ready for the tourists. I mean, they always create such an issue here. And the biggest issue is, especially after dip netting, they just leave the beach here just completely devastated with trash. And it is so annoying. And it costs, like, throughout the whole state with dip netting, it just costs so much money for the state to take care of and everything. So people who come dip netting up here, make sure your trash gets in the trash, please. If anybody listening to this ever does that.
Yeah, that's like a thing. If you go out, if you pack it in, pack it back out, guys. Don't leave your trash laying around. I hate that when the tourists and stuff like that come to Wyoming. Like, absolutely, guys, come to Wyoming, come enjoy the beautiful scenery. You know, go to Yellowstone, enjoy it. Like, but be respectful, man. The people that live here, we have to clean up after the nonsense. And I'm not trying to be a jerk, and I know you're not as well, but still, I mean, like,
I am.
It's pretty easy to clean up your apple cores and your pop bottles and stuff. Like, throw that stuff in your backpack and take it back out with you. On the other hand, go ahead.
And to be clear, like, just to be fair, it's not just people from out of state. We get people from Anchorage, and they're probably the worst about it.
Really?
Just because, like, Anchorage especially, they have a negative view on people down on the peninsula here. Like we're in the boonies, the boondocks, like, so they have a negative look on the people down on the peninsula. So they just treat everybody bad down here for the most part. I mean, there are some exceptions, and then they're probably the worst ones when it comes to the trash. But anyways, we're not here to talk about dip netting. This isn't a dip netting podcast. This is a Broncos football podcast, and training camp is just under 3 weeks away now. So it is a exciting time for us as we are shifting focus, getting ready for the regular season, and getting ready for training camp, which is what today's topic comes about.
Yeah, it's going to be an awesome conversation, guys. We're going to go through the entire roster, position by position, talking about the most important training camp battles that I believe I have some good ones. Erick also has some good ones as well. He does have an article. We're going to tease this really fast. He has an article coming out here very soon, detailing his thoughts in text in a little bit more in depth as well, talking about the top roster battles to keep your eyes on. He also has an article up live right now. We're going to touch on that here in this conversation as well, talking about 5 of the biggest veteran players on the roster that are put on notice based on the free agent and draft picks that the Broncos have brought in. So it's going to be a very fun conversation. We're going to get into kind of everything. But before we get into that, go ahead, Erick. Go ahead.
And on top of that, I also have an article up about the 5 players on the roster that are flying a little bit under the radar, and that is also going to be relevant for tonight's conversation. So make sure you guys go check those out.
Yeah, make sure you go milehighhuddle.com, check both those articles out, find out all of the rest of our wonderful content. I'm actually getting ready to start not really, I'll call it a mini series, but just a couple of pieces here detailing the 5 best moves that George Paton has done as his time as a GM that potentially could save his job, and the 5 worst that might have him on the hot seat going into the 2023 season. So those will be up here as well here in the next couple of days. Make sure you tune in to milehighhuddle.com and at milehighhuddle on Twitter to make sure you get those pieces as well. Now, before we get into the meat and potatoes of our conversation, got to say hello to everybody in the chat. So far, 47 people in the room and still growing. So we are still early here on a wonderful Friday evening, but we got to say hello. First things first, we got a super chat before the show came on. We're not going to get into the content of this. We're going to get there here in just a second, but we got to shout out our boy Troy over there. $10 super chat, wonderful gold retriever in the avatar photo. So what's up? Saying, hey guys, Austin Forsyth, versus Lloyd Cushenberry and Ioma Owazurike versus the other defensive linemen are my top ones to watch. spoiler alert, we're going to get both of these conversations in here this evening. We also have William Hayes in the house, Kevin Gray. We do have Todd Osendorf here in the house as well. Ernie Mays over on Facebook saying, what's up? We've got Keith Brugman jumping in saying, good evening to the best in-depth Broncos duo out there. Thank you, Keith. We appreciate that, man. Ray Osborne, Stu McPeak in the hizzy. What's up, Zeus? Good to see your name in the chat for the first time in quite a while. So thank you for joining us, man. It's a pleasure to have each and every single one of you guys here with us this evening. Now, Eric, I said we were going to go in roster position order. Typically, the way you go quarterback through wide receiver, interior defensive line, and work your way out position by position. Quarterback, pretty cut and dry. It's Russell Wilson. It's Jarrett Stidham. Does Jared Guarantano potentially make the roster as the third quarterback, or do they leave him on the practice squad and move on from Ben DiNucci? Or is it Ben DiNucci is the guy that makes this roster potentially as quarterback 3 or the practice squad guy?
Well, I mean, I think we all can say is that hopefully it doesn't matter which way they go.
Yes.
Like, hopefully the season doesn't completely fall off the rails to where the third quarterback battle is going to matter. It's not like last year where we were trying to figure out who the backup was going to be. We know who the backup's going to be. It's Stidham. Like, so Ben DiNucci, he's got some experience. Guarantano, he's kind of a interesting guy with his play style and everything. I liked him a little bit a while ago, but he never really developed in college. Can he in the NFL? Like, I don't know. It's not really much to talk about here. Not really a whole lot to go into. Whatever way, I mean, in my opinion, nowadays it's best to just go with 2 quarterbacks on your 53-man roster, save that spot, but I don't think Sean Payton will do that. He's a guy who's been pretty standard keeping 3, so I don't know. We'll see here in just a little over a month and a half, basically.
Yeah, I think DiNucci's probably going to be the guy just based on the fact that he has actual NFL experience. Like, Guarantano is a fun player to watch for sure. He likes to move around a little bit, has a pretty decent arm too, but DiNucci, the experience that he had playing in the NFL for the Dallas Cowboys, he's also a guy that really kind of dominates in the spring leagues and is a decent football player. I'll just at least put it that way. So I think that's where it's going to go. Moving on here, we're going to run, obviously, the running back position. We know, everybody knows that Javonte Williams coming off the big knee injury. Eric, you've kind of changed my mind a little bit. And based on what they're doing with him out at OTAs, getting him out there, working around, stuff like that, he may be a little bit sooner coming back than I originally anticipated, which was around the November area. Maybe we do get to see him in early October. Still, though, there's a big question mark here on who will be the running back 2 behind Samaje Perine. Is it Tony Jones Jr., who has time and experience with Sean Payton? Is it Tyler Beatty, a high upside player, undrafted player the Broncos brought in, I believe, off of the Baltimore Ravens practice squad at the tail end of last season? He was a 6th round draft pick by the Ravens. Six round. Okay, so saying thank you for that. Or is it going to be undrafted rookie free agent from Youngstown State, Jaleel McLaughlin, who I believe, if I remember correctly, is the all-time NCAA rushing leader? So, we've got a 3-way competition here. What is your opinion on this running back 2 conversation? Technically running back 3 on the roster, but running back 2 conversation as it stands right now.
I think a lot's going to depend on the health of Javonte Williams and how early it is he's able to get back. If it is going to be, if he's going to miss the first 4 weeks, then obviously I think 2 of the 3 are going to make it. Mm-hmm. Tyler Beatty is one of my under-the-radar players in the article that I was talking about, because all the attention is on Jaleel McLaughlin. Tyler Beatty has kind of been pushed to the side. Mm-hmm. Everybody's forgetting about him. He only got 2 touches last year, but one of them was a reception that he took for 24 yards and a touchdown. He showed his explosive ability. He showed his ability to make defenders miss. And some of them are good defenders. Because this was, I believe it was still when the Chargers were being idiots and playing their starters late in the game. So I like him to make it. I like his home run ability. Jaleel McLaughlin, for me, the biggest issue is that is a huge, huge jump from Youngstown State to the NFL.
Yeah. Huge
jump. And while running back is one of the easiest positions to transition from college to the NFL, it doesn't change the fact that you're making that big of a leap.
Yeah.
So if Williams is going to miss it, I think Tony Jones is, because they definitely want that power there. Mm-hmm. But if Williams is going to be back a little bit earlier and they're just going to skate by a little bit, I could see them going with Samaje Perine and then just one of the 2 explosive guys, with my bet being on Tyler Beatty at this moment.
I'm actually in agreement with you. Again, go with the guy with experience. Like you said, Youngstown State to the NFL level, that's a big jump. I don't give a damn if you're the all-time leader in NCAA football history in rushing yards. I believe that stat is accurate, by the way. I know he was one of the leaders last season in across all divisions of NCAA football. So that very well could be Youngstown State.
Yeah.
I believe is a D2 school. So that there's some gray area here. Regardless, doesn't really matter. And this is a big step for him. Tyler Beatty has shown the ability to be a high-quality receiver out of the backfield. Like you said, that 24-yard touchdown reception that he had against the Chargers late in the season last year, he's explosive, and he's not scared to get in there in pass protection either. That's another big thing that you have to have in the Sean Payton offense is the ability to stay in the backfield on third down and still be able to pick up blitzers coming up the A-gaps.
Yeah, and two things on this. I mean, he's coming from the SEC, which that's probably the closest in college football that you're going to get to the NFL is SEC football. Also, as Keith Brugman comes in here, Keith, we'll get to your comment about the safeties. That's definitely on our list to talk about. We'll get to that here a little bit later. But running back 2 will be Javonte. Well, when Javonte's healthy, he'll be running back 1. Or a signing late in training camp. There will be better options than Beatty or Jones. Yeah, and in the article when that gets published, that is one thing that I talk about. And that is one caveat with this whole thing is I do think the Broncos are going to look at bringing in another free agent. There are still plenty of good options. They've been linked with multiple guys. That is still an extremely viable option for them. But just for right now, without that guy, that's what we're just kind of the conversations about. But in the end, I do think that it'll be a free agent going, or a free agent being brought in. It's just with who they have right now, I'm putting my money on Beatty over McLaughlin for that final spot. With Jones being part of it too, if Williams isn't going to be healthy there in the first 4 weeks.
Right. And not to, be your Denver Broncos soothsayers or your football soothsayers, as like Chad and Zach like to say, your football priests. We're not going to say try to predict the future here either. This is what the roster is as it currently stands. We're breaking that down as of right now. I'm with Eric here. I think that they are going to go get a guy, whether it is Dalvin Cook, who seemingly gets thrown around in rumors to the Broncos every other day. Leonard Fournette was just shouted out by Pro Football Focus. And Eric, I know you're not a fan of that move. I'm not necessarily a fan of that move either. The guy that I want the Broncos to bring in as of now is Kareem Hunt. I think that there's enough boom for your buck there. He's not going to break the bank for you. Good receiver, good player out of the backfield as a blocker. Still has some ability to run a very good patient runner, good vision. He has lost a step, but he is a guy that you're going to have at least come in and be a guy with a lot of experience. He's a quality football player. That's the guy I want the Broncos to go and get, but it still remains to be seen where that conversation goes from here.
And on that note, just to say, is I'm not big on Leonard Fournette for multiple reasons, but if they want an extra power and they're going to they want to upgrade over Jones for the extra power back, Fournette along with Ryan Williams he makes sense. I still would prefer Kareem Hunt. Off-field stuff aside here, I'd still prefer Kareem Hunt because what he can do on the field, he kind of brings that variety that which Leonard Fournette doesn't bring. But if they want to go with that power and have that power guy behind P. Ryan to help wear down defenses, then Leonard Fournette is one of the better options out there. So is Ezekiel Elliott. Yeah. It's just I want a better explosive option, better home run ability than Tyler Beatty or Jaleel McLaughlin. That's just where I personally stand. Real quick, Angel Rocha came in saying, I can't forgive Fangio for letting go of Lindsey. That wasn't just Fangio. I know, and not saying this is you, Angel, or anything, but one thing that I see a lot with Bronco fans is as soon as the player or coach is done in Denver, they get all this hate. Saw it with Draymond Jones. We've seen it with Vic Fangio, and he deserves some of it. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying he's blameless for the issues that they had, but a lot of hate on Fangio comes with the decision of selecting the right quarterback to lead them in his final year in Teddy Bridgewater over Drew Lock. But letting go of Philip Lindsay, that had very little to do with Fangio and a lot more to do with the people that were above him making the financial decisions. Yeah. They were the ones that were we're going to move on from him and go elsewhere. So not so much Fangio on that one.
Well, I want to piggyback just really quickly about a lot of the vitriol that Broncos fans display to people that were around and quality players or even weren't quality players or even coaches, and they get so much hate and they never really get an opportunity to be just who they are. another tie into this is Vance Joseph, who there's been a lot of Broncos fans like, I don't want Vance Joseph back. He showed a whole bunch of incompetence as a head coach. Well, I personally have an article up on milehighhuddle.com right now, listening to a former head coach in the NFL who was a quality defensive coordinator for several years, and Chuck Pagano. Chuck Pagano thinks that Vance Joseph is going to be awesome as the defensive coordinator for the Denver Broncos team because of the pieces that he has in place. He's going to put him in the right situation. Vance Joseph is a damn good defensive coordinator. He may not be the right guy for the head coach at that particular point. He was like a fish out of water or swimming over his head, whatever analogy you want to use there. But it's like Chuck Pagano's like, this defense is going to be exciting. You're going to see a lot of multiple different looks, multiple different coverages. You're going to see a lot of exotic stuff coming out of this Broncos defense. They're going to get after the quarterback, and they're going to take the football away, which is something that this Broncos defense hasn't done for the most part for the last couple of seasons under Vic Fangio and Ejiro Evero as the defensive coordinators, where they like to play a little bit more off, some two-man, let the game come to them, keep everything in front. I did put the caveat in this. I know where you're going to go. Ejiro Evero did put more emphasis on pressure than Vic Fangio did, but for the most part, they were not a team that's going to be like a Vance Joseph defense, where they're going to bring double A gap pressure a lot of the time. They're not going to show exotic blitz coverages. They're just going to let the 5 guys up front just get the job done and play coverage on the back end. This is a different dynamic, and the Broncos have a lot of players that can fit here. Go ahead. I'll let you get your opinion. This is what I think, though.
Not opinion. This is actual fact. Here, the Broncos were 4th in total blitz percentage last year.
Oh,
as
really?
in 4th highest.
Okay.
They blitzed almost basically 33% of the time.
So
there's on Cardinals.
What are they calling a blitz? Is it a 4-man? Is it a 5-man pressure or a 6-man pressure for a blitz? Because it was a lot of 5-man stuff last season, from what I remember.
Which is a blitz. Anything more than 4. 4 is the standard of a standard rush.
Okay, anything
more than that is that's anything with football. A 5th rusher makes it a blitz. Whether you're in a bear front, penny front, whatever, a 5-down man, a 5th rusher is an automatic blitz. And that is something that Vance Joseph did quite a bit as well. And the Arizona Cardinals last year, 34.5%. So 1.6% to be exact, more blitzes than the Denver Broncos did under Evero. Evero was extremely aggressive, but he balanced out that aggressiveness with being a little bit more passive on the back end. Mm-hmm. Vance Joseph is just aggressive in the front and aggressive in the back. Mm-hmm. And not to go off on Vance Joseph too is like, and to get back on the topic, a lot of people don't realize how good Vance Joseph's defense have been over the years. Mm-hmm. I have a couple articles on it. I've talked about it a lot on here. When you look at the DVOA that his defense has had, they've been consistently top 12 outside of like 2 years. So like his defenses haven't been terrible, and he gets a lot of crap for that.
I guess the one question, just quickly. You know what? Never mind. Let's move on. We'll get to that here in just a second here when we flip to the defensive side of the football, because I think that this is the most talented defense Vance Joseph has ever seen. Like with the total talent top to bottom, this is a very talented defense, and they all fit what he wants to do. That was the biggest point that I wanted to try to get out there with that. We got Naj jumping in here with a question on the defensive side of the football. $20 super chat. Hey, brothers, who do you see at defensive back opposite of PS2? Right off the bat, it's going to be a battle for Damari Mathis and Riley Moss is the way that I'm going to see that. But the rest of the cornerback room, we're going to get there. Thank you, Naj, for your support, and thank you for jumping in here. We're going to get there. Let's go back to the offensive side of the football here. Wide receiver room. Eric, in your article that you have coming up, I'm not trying to spoil everything too much, but you have a lot of questions about this wide receiver room. Why?
Well, because outside of who wide receiver 4 is, we don't know the actual pecking order of anything. What is the pecking order going to be of 1, 2, and 3? Courtland Sutton has been the number 1 guy, but last year before he got hurt, it was Tim Patrick was going to be the number 1 guy, and we're already hearing a lot of that coming out this year. To end last season, it was Jerry Jeudy. He's stepping up to be the number 1 guy. A lot of people are projecting him to be the number 1 guy this year. Who's it actually going to be? Now, one caveat with this, and who the top target is changes game to game. I mean, it's very matchup based, matchup oriented. Who's going to have the favorable matchup? That's a huge factor in it. But when you're looking at the depth chart, who's going to be the number 1 receiver? Is it going to be Patrick? Is it going to be Sutton? Is it going to be Jeudy? All 3 of them I expect to make the roster unless something happens, last minute trade with Courtland Sutton before the season starts. So all of them make the roster. And then the next thing is so you have Marvin Mims at number 4. Who's the final two guys? Who are your two special teamers? I fully expect Marquez Callaway to take that final spot. Who's that next one? Do they keep a little bit more of a vertical threat speed ability? Something that outside of Marvin Mims, they're kind of lacking. Jerry Jeudy's more of a route runner than a true speedster type. Mm-hmm. So does KJ Hamler or Jalen Virgil get the edge? Do they go with the pure returner, and even though they have Tremont Smith, which we'll get to that later, and go with Montreal Washington despite all of his issues last year and hope that he can step up? Mm-hmm. Do they go with somebody who's kind of more of a well-rounded skill set kind of type of guy with a Kendall Hinton or a Brandon Johnson that can contribute on special teams as a gunner or as a returner with Hinton, and then a gunner with Johnson, and then be a rounded skill set on offense? So there's a lot of questions for it. I included 5 in my article, spot 5 and 6, although I do expect 5 to be Marquez Callaway. His ability on special teams is just way too valuable, other than what he has done in Sean Payton's offense as a reliable receiving option. That as well just kind of cements him there for me. So a lot of questions with this room, and it's questions that we haven't answered. I mean, it's questions that have been brought on by the team. Shopping Jerry Jeudy, shopping Courtland Sutton, continuously hearing rumors about how they want to cheapen the cost of the receiver room because it's a very expensive room right now. Yep. So a lot of questions with it, essentially from top to bottom, that we're going to get a lot of answers, and we're probably going to get answers to this pretty early on in training camp.
Yeah, I think the one player that you can consider like the safest on this wide receiver roster right now is Marvin Mims. Like you said, with the conversation of Courtland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy being shopped around, Tim Patrick, we don't know exactly what his status is coming back. So potentially there's number 2 that you could say is like the safest player. But KJ Hamler has been shopped around in trade rumors. We don't know Marquez Callaway and what he's going to bring to this roster. That's probably wide receiver 3 that you could almost, I don't want to say guarantee, but I'll throw the air quotes around it, guarantee a roster spot. After that, it's just a mishmash of what do you prefer for this team. So it's such a hard room to get a gauge on. There's so many layers to this conversation. And like you said, it is a very expensive room. The Broncos are paying $44 million going into this season to the wide receiver position, number 1 in the NFL. And this team has never seen these guys have a 1,000-yard season ever. None of them have had a 1,000-yard NFL season. That's a problem. And it's something that we're going to have to see a big answer to this big question. What is the pecking order here? Is Courtland Sutton actually on the move, whether it's at the beginning of training camp, somewhere in the middle of training camp, or around the trade deadline? Is it Jerry Jeudy potentially on the move? To me, I think that it makes more sense to move a guy with a bigger contract like Tim Patrick or Courtland Sutton. Go ahead.
When you're talking about receivers not having a 1,000-yard season, were you including Sutton in that?
Did he have 1,000 yards? Because I thought it was only 980 something.
He picked up over 1,100 yards in 2019.
Okay, so apologies. I'd heard someone say that it was in the last 3 seasons. It was that's for sure a fact, obviously. But regardless, like, thanks for the housekeeping there. I do appreciate that. But the overarching point still matters here. 1,000-yard season from Courtland Sutton before he tore his ACL, mind you. Since that happened, no receiver on the Broncos roster has had 1,000-yard season. So that was the overarching point. Anyways,
which I don't disagree with. I don't disagree with that whatsoever.
Yeah. Let's grab a couple of supers here really fast. We got GLP, Gary Palmer over there on YouTube jumping in, $10 super chat. Thank you, Gary, for that. Saying, hey, Lance, Eric, Scott, and Dylan. No Scott tonight. Scott's got baseball, but Dylan is here running the chat behind the scenes. So thank you, Dylan, for joining us as well. Hello, Broncos country. Go Broncos. Buck 'em. We also have Michael Ronquillo, one of the super chat superstars here on Dove Valley Deep Divers and across all of the Huddle Up podcast, Mile High Huddle podcast network here. Michael jumping in saying, good evening, Lance and Eric on Dove Valley Deep Divers. Go Broncos and buck 'em. And I guess one last thing on this wide receiver room, and Eric, you kind of touched on it, especially with the special teams ability. I think that if you're wanting an extra speedster on this roster to pair with Marvin Mims, just to bring that dynamic of going down the field, I want your opinion on this, but I think that it's going to be, if you're looking to get cheaper at this wide receiver room. I know the Broncos just restructured KJ Hamler's contract last week, but does it make more sense to have Jalen Virgil, who does have some special teams experience, some return ability as well, to take over KJ Hamler, or does KJ Hamler just kind of get that one last chance, stash Jalen Virgil on the practice squad, and then move on from KJ Hamler after 2023?
the issue with Jalen Virgil right now is we have no idea where he's at as a football player.
Right.
Last year he was a track star playing football.
Yes.
Which is fine. Like, he could do one thing and he could do it extremely well. Well, you kind of want a little bit more. And KJ Hamler, he can work those underneath routes at least and catch the ball and make something happen, or he can be that track star stretching the field.
Mm-hmm.
It all depends on how he's coming back from injury. And this is going back to Montreal Washington. I don't expect Montreal Washington to make this roster.
Me neither.
I think it was pretty clear cut that, they made the changes to the coaching staff and immediately Montreal Washington was benched.
Yep.
I don't think he sticks around on the practice squad. They got their returner in Tremont Smith. We'll talk about that more when we get to the corner battle that's going on primarily at nickel. So I think the edge, if he's healthy, if the torn pec is good enough,
mm-hmm.
I think Hamler is the guy for that final spot. But it could very much be a question of it. It's just a question of that health, and maybe Virgil, maybe he shows a great growth as a receiver and he's able to crack it. Yeah. But we spent a lot of time on receiver. Let's get to tight ends, because tight ends is pretty simple here.
Yeah.
And to me, the biggest question is, how many do they keep? Is it going to be 4? Is it going to be 3 with the fullback? So typically you see 4 total, with one of them being able to play fullback. Teams that keep up here fullback typically only keep 3 tight ends.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you know your top 3. Manhurts, Trotman, Dulcich. So Albert Okwuegbunam, he's in a battle to impress the coaches enough to force them to adjust their roster math to keep a 4th tight end. Mm-hmm. I don't think Nate Adkins and Tommy Hudson have a whole lot there to take the 4th spot from Okwuegbunam. If either of them did, I think Nate Adkins, because he does offer a little bit more versatility.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just mostly going to be, all right, coaches, I'm looking at what I'm doing. You got to keep me around. That's that kind of training camp from Okwuegbunam.
Well, and they just brought in a Super Bowl champion, Michael Burton, to play that fullback role. So not that he can play the tight end position, but he still has that fullback versatility, H-back kind of stuff like that. He's not an inline guy. But if you need to have a lead blocker out there to go and crack some skulls, Michael Burton brings that ability just in spades. So that's the big thing. I'm with you on this one. I think Albert Okwuegbunam is on the way out. Like you put into the article, make sure you guys go check this out. Again, guys, milehighhuddle.com, 5 veterans on the roster that are on the roster bubble, potentially on their way out. Albert Okwuegbunam, what you said was, how can you stay on a roster over multiple different coaching staffs and still be in the doghouse no matter which one you're on? He's in the doghouse already from what it sounds like. I mean, he's showed a little bit, but for the most part, this conversation is wrapped around Chris Manhertz, Adam Troutman, and Greg Dulcich, like you just said. Like Sean Payton made a very big emphasis on upgrading over what Albert Okwuegbunam brings. He's a good athlete, very good stretching the seam and stuff like that, but that's his one trick. He's not a great route runner. He's not a good blocker at the point of attack. He's not a good blocker on the backside of the point of attack. This, to me, seems like a fool's errand. Alberto is probably on the way out, guys. And I hate to say that. I like him as a person. I think he's a good dude, but you got to be good at football to play in the NFL, and Alberto is just not in a lot of different facets. So interesting conversation there, not really cut and dry for the most part. Offensive line, though, this is where things get a little bit tricky, because the roster math and how these players that have inside and outside versatility is going to be very interesting to get to. I know I said I wanted to go offensive tackle, guard, center, but we did have a super chat earlier. I believe it was from Troy Boer, who was asking about the offensive center position. Is it going to be Alex Forsyth? Is it going to be Lloyd Cushenberry, the incumbent starter for the last couple of seasons? The Broncos also brought in Kyle Fuller, who is a former center for the Seattle Seahawks, who has experience snapping to Russell Wilson in his time in the NFL. Do they maybe slide Quinn Miners over, get him into the mix there to just get the best 5 players out on the field? How does this conversation go with you, Eric? And I know we kind of touched on it a little bit before, but I want your thoughts again here on specifically Forsyth versus Cushenberry for Troy.
So Cushenberry has had issues. Like, basically he was the starter last year because of what Russell Wilson wanted. He wanted the slightly shorter guy in Lloyd Cushenberry than Graham Glasgow to be the starter at center, until Lloyd Cushenberry got hurt, and they're just like, yeah, well, he's hurt. And then the coaching staff that made that decision, that allowed Wilson really to make that decision. And I'm not trying to crap on Wilson here. This is just how things went. Those that allowed him, they got fired, and the new staff was like, "Yep, no, we're sticking with Graham Glasgow, who should have been starting in the first place because the offensive line did better with him. The run game did better with Graham Glasgow at center, and I think that's what Graham Glasgow brings is quite similar to what Alex Forsyth can bring. Obviously, Glasgow, multiple years, pretty solid offensive lineman, not great, been able to develop in the NFL. Alex Forsyth, a rookie, so not at all trying to say they're the same player. But Alex Forsyth is tough. He's physical. He's got it mentally. He's a decent enough mover. He's got decent enough strength. And the biggest reason why he fell to the 6th round was because he had a hamstring injury that kept him from doing almost anything during the draft process. Mm-hmm. And NFL teams don't hate anything more outside of being unless you're a top draft prospect, than being unable to participate during the draft cycle. They absolutely hate it, and they will drop you significantly as a result, especially when it's medical, because medicals are so tricky.
Yeah.
So I think there's a possibility he can take the starting job. I think that he has more of a chance to do it than Kyle Fuller. But Lloyd Cushenberry, he's the guy for now. Sean Payton made it very clear that he's the starter for now because they don't really have a lot of better options. Mm-hmm. And he said that before the draft, before they tried to trade up for 3 different centers in that draft.
Yes.
Nothing says I lack confidence in the guy I just said is our starting center more than trying to trade up for 3 different centers.
I believe it was John Michael Schmitz. They were trying to trade up in front of somebody.
He was one of the 3.
Yep. I knew that he was one of them. Who are the other 2, if you might just throw that out there? I'm curious.
Well, also real quick on the same note, what is funny about this too is during the 2022 NFL draft, the Denver Broncos also tried to trade up for a center and just weren't able to pull through with it. Mm-hmm. Like for 2 drafts now, they have tried to trade up for centers and have not been able to do it.
No, and they also had their. So let me just add some more context to this. When they drafted Lloyd Cushenberry, they were not targeting Lloyd Cushenberry. In fact, they were pissed off. And this was
They weren't. No.
What do you mean? They weren't trying to target Lloyd Cushenberry?
No, they weren't trying to target Cushenberry. He was their backup.
They were trying to get Matt Henningsen. Yeah, they were trying to get Matt Henningsen, and Matt Henningsen went like 1 pick before them to the Atlanta Falcons. And if I remember correctly, the Broncos actually traded back and then took Lloyd Cushenberry. If I remember that right, I could be wrong on that, but I'm fairly certain they were going to take Henningsen. I know that for a fact. And then Henningsen went to the Falcons, and they decided they were going to trade back and then pick up Lloyd Cushenberry. Again, little bits of context.
So there's a lot to this.
Yes.
So they traded out for Michael Ojemudia because they got word that Michael Ojemudia was going to go in the next few picks. Mm-hmm. And they went Michael Ojemudia because of that, and they felt that Matt Hennessy can fall to their next pick, which was 83 at the time. Mm-hmm. Which ended up being 83. The trade they got for the Steelers for trading back and landing Noah Fant, that whole trade. But Matt Hennessy went 78 after they picked Michael Ojemudia, and so their backup option was Lloyd Cushenberry. Mm-hmm. But anyways, the other 2 centers, Joe Tippmann in the 2nd round, they also tried moving up for him, and they also tried moving up for Ricky Stromberg at the end of the 3rd round. Yep. He was another one they tried to move up after they got up for
wasn't it with
Riley Moss.
Mm-hmm.
Huh?
Wasn't it with Washington too? They were going to try to trade up with Washington, and Washington said, no, our guy's here, and they ended up taking Stromberg.
They tried getting up right around where he ended up being picked.
Yes. Okay.
So they don't have confidence in him. So Kyle Fuller or Alex Forsyth ending up the starter, entirely plausible. I know that this coaching staff really likes him. They're a lot higher on him than where they got picked at. As for tackle, your 2 starters, your swing tackle, Cam Fleming.
Yep.
Who's the 4th guy? And here's the thing with this is when you look at the interior offensive line, at guard specifically, you have your 2 starters, then you have Henry Bird and Will Sherman. Neither of them inspire a lot of confidence for being it. And roster math here is absolutely vital because the more you can do on the offensive line, the better, because teams are trying to go away. Before, 10 was the standard. Like 15 years ago, 10 offensive linemen was the standard, 2 for every single position on the offensive line. And then it dropped down to 9. You don't need a backup peer center if you have a guard that can also play center. Mm-hmm. Now teams are starting to look at only 8. We'll have our starting 5. We'll have a pure backup guard. we'll have our backup interior offensive lineman, and then we'll have our we'll have our backup interior offensive lineman, we'll have our backup guard tackle, and then we'll have our backup swing tackle. Those are the three backups. So this battle gets interesting for that final spot, because most of the guys that you're going to be looking at are considered tackles. Quinn Bailey, Alex Pachuski, Demontre Jacobs, Isaiah Prince. They're all guys that can slide inside and play guard as well. I don't think Henry Burton and Will Sherman are the guys. So who's going to be this final offensive line? Who's going to be that 8th and 9th guy on this unit? Mm-hmm. Because honestly, after your starting 5 and after Alex Forsyth, and I'm including him because he's a rookie, and including Cam Fleming, none of these offensive linemen, bring a whole lot of confidence with their ability if they have to go out there on the field.
Yeah.
Like, I've been hammering away for a while for the Broncos to go look at offensive line in free agency still, and there are still some good options there that can play pure interior offensive line, that can be guard tackles. There's a lot of good options still out there that they definitely should look into.
Well, and especially one that's for cheap. And I know that this is something I'm going to have to get into with the George Payton conversation here at a later date within my articles here. There's a player out there that has a lot of starting experience, but he's got a lot of injury concerns, specifically over the last couple of seasons. One of them, not necessarily his fault, got rolled up on and broke his fibula. Chase Roulier, former starting center.
Retired.
Oh, he did retire. I missed that. Okay, so thank you for the update. Never mind.
He just retired yesterday.
I did not see that, so thank you for the update on that. That's unfortunate because I thought that he still had a lot of football left in him. And congratulations, Chase Roulier, coming out of Wyoming. A smaller, undersized guy that went out and became a quality starter in the NFL, was a top 3 interior offensive lineman, I believe. I know for a fact a center, top 3 center in terms of pass protection a couple of seasons ago. So congratulations to him, and hopefully he finds peace in retirement, man. This is good for him.
To be fair, retirements nowadays, you don't know how lasting they are.
Yeah.
People coming out, but get this conversation moving along, going over to the interior defense, or the interior defensive line, another position where we both have a lot of talked about a lot, as needing additional help. Who's that third starter going to be? Is it going to be Mike Purcell? Is it going to be Uwazurike? Or is it going to be Matt Henningsen? He's got one of the guys that I have that's going under the radar a little bit. There's been a lot of like for him. From conversations I've had, there's been a lot of praise. So could he step in and be that third guy? Because he's not a great pass rusher, but he's a strong run defender. And when you're looking for this third starter spot on this Broncos defensive line, run defense is the priority here.
Yeah.
Run defense was a priority for the defensive line in general. It's why they went out and got DJ Jones last year. It's why they got Zach Allen this year over Draymond Jones. Run defense. Your edge rushers, like you can hurt yourself a little bit with run defense because your defensive line, they're so good at it. So Matt Henningsen could be that, and it can still allow you to move around DJ Jones. Whereas if you go Mike Purcell, you're a little bit more stuck with what you can do with the interior defensive line. So you have your options there before you, and there's also a battle for the final spot and with roster math. With how versatile a lot of these defensive linemen are for the Broncos, and what you can do with someone like Frank Clark, who's going to be an edge for them, but you can put him in a 3-point stance and line him up as a 5-tech and see him go to work.
Yes, you can.
They could see themselves only go with 5 defensive linemen.
And my big question, doing the show prep here and just trying to get some questions, digging through the roster, the one that I've brought up multiple times, I know it's been brought up a couple of different times, and Eric kind of went back and forth with me a little bit on this one.
Sorry to interrupt, but just to get this out there, since we were talking about Sanders a little bit, I don't think cutting Kush saves much money. No reason to get rid of him if he's not even the starter. You can save $2.7 million on the salary cap by cutting him with only just under $250,000 in dead cap. He's got almost a $3 million cap hit, and you can save 2.7. I think that's worth cutting him for.
It definitely is, especially if you need to go out and you need to find another. To hell with it, another interior offensive lineman to play at the guard position. You don't like the guys that you have, and guys like Quinn Bailey or Alex Palczewski or what the heck's his name? His name's escaping me. Regardless, like you need another swing tackle, another guy that can play guard tackles, center guard, whatever it may be. Maybe you want to go out and find another running back, a guy like a Kareem Hunt. You need $2.7 million to sign Kareem Hunt right now. There you go. That's the player you're probably moving on from to be able to get that done. I'm with Eric here. I think that it's a good point. I don't think cutting him is probably the option, but at the same time, it's definitely on the table. It's not like there's a non-0% chance that Lloyd Cushenberry's played his last snap in Denver. Back to the interior defensive line here. The one question that I wrote down, just doing the show prep and trying to get an idea here of what we're going to be talking about. The first thing I wrote down was, is Mike Purcell on the way out? And the reason why I say that is he's 33 years old, has seen a fairly steady decline in the last couple of seasons. He's still a force in the running game, but the flash that he had in 2021 as a pass rusher is really just a flash more than actually showing the growth that you need to have there. And he's also super positioned.
He didn't flash as a pass rusher in 2021.
So let me correct it. I'm not going to really correct it because there was some times where he actually had some impact as a pass rusher, but it was more than what it was before, but still not good enough. Is really the big thing. Specifically early in the season against Pittsburgh, he had that one really good game where he played against Pittsburgh where he was okay as a pass rusher. That's not the overarching point I'm trying to make here. You
mean a game where he had no pressures?
The game against Pittsburgh, I swear he had a big.
He had no pressures in that game.
What game?
No, Mike Purcell's best year in Denver was 2019.
Okay,
and it's not even close. He was outstanding as a run defender, and ever since then he has gone downhill. But one thing that has been a consistent issue with him has been his tackling ability.
Mm-hmm.
I think you keep him around because his ability as a run defender, when you have to go big in short yardage situations, like boom, like you have that there. So it's just an issue. Keith Brugman, there's another comment here that I want to grab too. Mike Purcell in 2021 was great at deflecting passes. The one that he deflected, I'm sorry, one isn't great to me. But anyways, the comment you have is Mike Purcell playing at 2019 level, which this statement I agree with. 2019 was the best year of his career, and it's not even close. Puts DJ Jones in the best position, but it doesn't. DJ Jones' best position, even going back during his time in San Francisco, was between a 0 and 2 technique, which that's what Mike Purcell does. So you're putting one of them out of position. Last year, they did a lot of putting DJ Jones as the 0 to 2 technique, and then Mike Purcell outside of that. And it was absolutely terrible. So these two guys, it needs to be looked at as DJ Jones should be the starter nose, and Mike Purcell's the backup, and then you need the starter outside of them. Mm-hmm. That's how it should be with their skill sets. If you want to go big against the run and really hurt your pass rush and hope that your edge rushers can do it, then fine. You can play DJ Jones as a 3 technique, 4-eye technique, whatever. Mike Purcell inside as your nose as a 0-1, and then Zach Allen offset as a 5 technique. You can do that.
Yeah.
But you're really limiting what you can do as a pass rusher.
Right. Well, then you're getting Randy Gregory, Frank Clark on the field there as well, depending on where you want to do them. And how does that rotation play out? That's another big thing here. Lastly, here on the defensive line, because then I want to get into this edge conversation because this rotation is going to be a mess, in my opinion. But what about Jonathan Harris? Is he a player that could potentially crack the tail end of this roster again, or is he potentially that guy on the way out of the defensive line?
Roster math. Do they keep 6? That's the only way he has a chance. Do they keep 6? And even then, he has a bunch of other guys that he has to beat out for that spot. There's a lot there with Tyler Lancaster is possibly being that 6th, PJ Mustipher being that 6th guy, Elijah Garcia, and even the foreign kid that they got, Debussy. Even he's part of this because there's a lot of hype about him already with how quickly he picked things up. So Jonathan Harris, he was one of those guys that he was a fan. He was a favorite of Vic Fangio, and he kind of hung around despite never really doing anything. And last year, the incompetence of the coaching staff kept him around again. I think it was Keith Brugman that brought in real quick about improvement on the offensive line coaching this year being a help. It definitely could, but until we see it, we have no idea how big of an impact that will be. Mm-hmm. All I know is that it'll be much better having a coaching staff that isn't deciding 100% on who plays based off of how much you're getting paid, which was a big issue last year. Yeah. But so it could help with that. But anyways, Jonathan Harris, he's definitely lost the favoritism from the coaching staff from Vic Fangio's era. So I have a hard time seeing him stick around. I have a hard time seeing them keep 6.
Yeah. I'm curious here, and the reason why is the roster math, you're right. Do they keep 6? Do they keep 5 edge defenders? Do they keep 6 guys? How does the front look? Are we talking a 0? Let's see. Go right to left. We'll go a 5 technique, Zach Allen, a 3 technique, a 0-2 technique, and then another 5 technique in Frank Clark with 4 down linemen. Are we talking 3 down linemen, 0-3-3? Are we talking 2 standing edge defenders? That's where this conversation gets very interesting.
We're talking tricky. All of it.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's this conversation's always evolving here. Yeah. But moving it to the edge defenders, if you're going to have a Mike Purcell, DJ Jones as your starting 2 interior defensive linemen, then you need a 5 technique on the backside of that. Do you work Frank Clark as a hand in the dirt 7 technique next to DJ Jones? Do you stand up Baron Browning out there? Do you stand up Randy Gregory? What does this edge position look like in terms of the rotation? I've got a follow-up question here as well. Who are the first 2 edges that are going to be on the field? Is it going to be Gregory, and I believe Frank Clark's going to be one of the 2, but is it going to be Randy Gregory or is it going to be Baron Browning?
Gregory.
Is it? Okay.
As long as Gregory is healthy, he's going to be it. Mm-hmm. Baron Browning still very much learning, and what they do with Frank Clark, it's going to depend so much on down distance, game situation, game scenario. Yeah. If it's an obvious passing down, 3rd and 18, and you want to go a little bit more pass rush, well, you have DJ Jones, you have Zach Allen, then you're putting Frank Clark in his hand in his dirt, and then you're putting Gregory and Browning on the edges.
Yep.
You're getting your most bang for your buck as a pass rush that way. And if you want to go really, really silly with it, you can kind of slide inside Zach Allen and to be more of a 3 technique. And you could bring in another 2 rusher up with Randy Gregory on one side. Yep. So you have Zach Allen, then you have Zach Allen here, then you have Clark and Browning, and then you have Gregory and Cooper or Benito or whoever that 4th pass edge rusher is going to be, because nobody knows. Everybody's wanting to head it to Nick Benito because he was the first round, or not the first round, he was the first pick of the Broncos in 2022. Well, that coaching staff is gone. That doesn't matter anymore if he was the first pick of the old coaching staff that saw themselves getting fired before the season was over because of so much incompetence.
Yep.
A defensive coordinator last year who openly called him out multiple times, saying that he has so much that he still has to work on. Mm-hmm. Maybe he takes a step up. Maybe the coaching finally gets to him or gets through to him and he's able to develop as a run defender. Jonathan Cooper, he's kind of there. He's a solid all-around defender. He's not great, but he has shown his value as a 4th guy in a rotation already, having to step up multiple times because of injuries, because the Broncos weren't able to stay healthy, and their edge room was so terrible that after they would make a move, they diminished. After they traded away Von Miller, Jonathan Cooper was the only one who was actually somewhat decent. After they traded away Bradley Chubb, granted, Randy Gregory was hurt, Baron Browning was dealing with injuries. From the edge room, Jonathan Cooper was the only one who was actually decent. He was the only edge defender last year, not counting Chubb because Chubb was traded. He was the only edge defender last year who was at least solid against the run.
Yep.
So no idea how this edge room is going to look. Outside of the top 3, because there's so many questions about what Nick Benito can show as he's trying to grow this year as a player. One guy, too, that I don't think is getting enough credit is Thomas Nkoum. He is a guy that I fully think can really push and make and land himself a spot on this roster because he's a capable run defender who's still growing as a pass rusher, that you know what he can bring on special teams. You don't have to have a designated special teams player at edge in Aaron Patrick like he did last year, because Thomas Nkoum can do a little bit of everything on defense as well. He can play multiple things on special teams as well, both coverage and kickoff duties or punting duties, whatever it is. I don't think Aaron Patrick makes it this year. Nick Benito, he'll make the roster just because of the draft pedigree involved in him this year. Beyond this year, depends on what he shows. So you're looking at 6 edge rushers, and you have 3 of them in Clark, Gregory, Browning. You have Benito. The last 2, my bet, Cooper and Nkoum.
Wouldn't surprise me, but we got Michael Ronquillo jumping in here. And I'm glad that he did this, and you mentioned his name. But he says, Lance and Eric, which Broncos defensive player has to step up during Broncos training camp, and which Broncos offensive player has to step up during Broncos training camp? the guy that I have on this Broncos defense that needs to step up is absolutely Nick Bonitto. You need that guy to step up and not just be a rotational pass rusher, a guy that just has that role coming off as that fourth edge defender. You need this guy to become something. You wasted a lot of draft cap. Not to say that they traded up to go get him. They got that as a tail end pick of the Von Miller trade, the second round pick that they got from the Los Angeles Rams. They picked him at number 64 overall. But you're talking about a guy that needs to play 25 to 40 snaps a game potentially as a quality edge defender, a guy that can go out there and still be a force on first and second down and not just be a rotational pass rusher. Nick Bonitto has to show out this season. He has to show the growth. He has to show the play strength in the running game. He has to get better all the way around. Last season was rookie season, still some rookie jitter, stuff like that. But I questioned the pick when it first happened. I wish they would have went in a different direction at the edge position there. Josh Pascal was the one that I really liked the most. And I think he went just shortly after Bonitto went. I can't remember exactly, but still, Nick Bonitto was such an abject disaster in the running game, not only as a Bronco, but also at Oklahoma, that it was a big question for me if you wanted to take him in the top 100, let alone in the top 64. So Bonitto is the one guy I have to see on this defense to really take a step forward. They need him to take a step forward. This edge room is still a disaster. It's a disaster moving through 2023 and into 2024. It's a big reason why they went out and got Frank Clark to be a quality starter, a guy that you could at least trust on the outside, because Gregory, Browning, Bonitto, Jonathan Cooper, none of them have actually shown. And I like your dissertation on Cooper, so let me just kind of backtrack that just a little bit. But is he a guy that you want out there being a full-time guy in the rotation as that third edge defender? Probably not. Bonitto has to step up this year. Absolutely. No question, 100%.
But at best, you're getting Bonitto as the fourth guy. At best.
I know.
And Josh Pascal, he was drafted 46th overall, so he was long gone.
Okay.
Anyways. On the question, Michael, thank you for the question. Really appreciate it. Defensive player to step up, Damari Mathis.
Okay, that's a good one too.
And we'll get more into that here in just a little bit when we get to corners. But I'm not disagreeing with you. Nick Bonitto needs to step up. He needs to show that he can be somebody. That way they can try to potentially move on from Randy Gregory after this season and saves a lot of money. Yep. Frank Clark, who is a free agent after this year. They need these depth guys at edge to step up so they can provide more versatility, and they're not forced to like, oh, we have to bring Randy Gregory back because we don't have anybody else. Nick Bonitto has to step up. He's got to show his value there as that 64th overall pick last year. Moving inside to linebackers real quick, I want to say Josey Jewell, I fully expect him to make the roster. I fully expect him to be one of the two starters. The only way he isn't a starter is if he's traded. That is a possibility that he gets traded. There were some rumors there not long after the draft of his name going around. There didn't seem to be a lot of traction at the time. Maybe things circle back. The Broncos could be comfortable enough with Drew Sanders at that point of having him take over. Well, if Drew Sanders takes over, then Alex Singleton's the top guy. Without that, Josey Jewell's the top guy with Alex Singleton next to him. There's not much battle outside of at linebacker other than that. It's just a matter of fact of I expect Jewell to make it. I expect Jewell to start. Drew Sanders is going to have a pretty decent role on the defense, and that's it. Jonas Griffith is the final linebacker I expect to make it because of what he can bring on special teams.
Right. That was the one thing I was going to say was I'm not going to say does having Jonas Griffith make Jewell expendable, but what does the impact of Jonas Griffith, if he does show out as a competent player, if Drew Sanders shows out to be a competent player, could the Broncos be willing to move on from Jewell to save that, I think it's $3.5 million worth of a cap hit? With having Jewell and Sanders, if they both take that step forward, and Jonas Griffith, for what it's worth, was very well liked and appreciated by multiple different Broncos coaching staffs, including last season, where it looked like he was going to be the starter opposite of Josey Jewell. So this is a very real conversation. Like if Jonas Griffith shows out that he can actually come back from that dislocated elbow, and I believe it was a knee injury he had as well last season, and shows that he understands the defense and can still just like be that rising star in the linebacker room, does that help make Josey Jewell a little bit more expendable to this Broncos defense?
Well, no, I think it's all going to revolve around Drew Sanders. Jonas Griffith, he was the starter last year, and he lost it.
Okay, that's fair.
Injuries didn't help, but even when he was healthy, he still wasn't playing good enough. He was late to rotate. He was caught unaware multiple times in coverage. It wasn't nearly good enough. Right. He showed promise there to the end of the 2021 season that didn't carry over and didn't progress upon. Keith Brugman comes in. If Jewell is traded, Griffith will play opposite Singleton. No, the only way they're moving Jewel is for Drew Sanders to step in. Mm-hmm. That's it. That is the only way they'll move Jewel. They're not going to move Jewel for Jonas Griffith. It's to get Drew Sanders on the field.
Right. And that's
100% on that.
I guess just to re-clarify my question, that would be that Sanders steps up and Jewel and Griffith shows that he is at least capable of playing in a rotational role as a defender. That is why I think that there's still a possibility that Josey Jewell is on the way out. Is that Jonas Griffith at least shows enough as a competent backup player to be. I'm not saying he's gonna be a starter. Drew Sanders is the guy. Like, this dude's legit. He's gonna be freaking awesome. That is the question that I have here. And I agree with Angel, who jumps in here. Again, this is Josey Jewell's last year in Denver, regardless if it 100%. Starts in 2023 or ends in 2024. This is 100% Josey Jewell's last year in Denver. That was made very clear by the fact that they selected Drew Sanders as that guy, and they want him to play off the ball. So 100%, Angel, you're absolutely correct here. This is Josey Jewell's last year in Denver.
He 100% does, Keith. 100%.
Yeah,
and I can tell you why, and it's very simple. He is a high third round draft pick by this coaching staff. Yep. Jonas Griffith was an undrafted free agent that was traded for by not the previous coaching staff, right. The coaching staff before that,
right?
Who hasn't shown anything on defense to cement himself there. Drew Sanders, you get versatility, you get a piece that Vance Joseph likes to have in his defense. Mm-hmm. Drew Sanders, 100%, every single time, 10 out of 10, gets the nod over Jonas Griffith in the occasion that Josey Jewell is traded. Well, and then stepping back real quick, there was another comment here I wanted to grab from Keith real quick. Go ahead. I want to grab this. An edge in college. Not sure he can in the NFL and can't rush in the NFL. One of the top offensive tackles last year, or for next year, Thomas Nkoum whipped him. Absolutely controlled him all game long. The Penn State left tackle, Olu Fasciani, or whatever his name is, Thomas Nkoum absolutely whipped him. He's not an athletic edge rusher, but he can get through guys. The issue with him is that he's just got to get the tools, the technique down. He's got to get those pieces put together. He can rush the passer in the NFL, especially with development. Mm-hmm. Setting the edge, sure, like he can set the edge in the NFL. He's got the technique down. That's one of the best things he did in college. Mm-hmm. And the technique doesn't change. But the question is can he handle the change in strength and everything? And of course, that's always the question. Yep. There's a reason why the transition to the college game is so big and why star players in college don't always translate over. But when we're talking about Nick Benito, when we're talking about Jonathan Cooper, when we're talking about these guys, Nick Benito couldn't set an edge in college. Nick Benito got most of his pressures in college based off the scheme. That was a slanting scheme that got him a lot of open looks to get after the quarterback.
Yes.
And he has shown that he can't really get after the quarterback in the NFL. He had a couple of nice pass rushes, two of which came completely unblocked. Yep. So, yeah, Thomas Nkoum, he has his issues. I'm not trying to say he's a perfect guy or anything like that. And I'm talking about him as like the fifth or sixth guy on this rotation, on the defensive line. And Nick Benito, you want him to be the fourth guy.
Mm-hmm. You need him to do that.
And he has to earn it. He's got to show it. Yep. But moving on. There was something you wanted to say about
just quickly. I wanted to go back to this Drew Sanders comment from Keith. And Keith, I'm not coming at you. We're not coming at you, man. You bring a lot of good conversation to the chat. And we appreciate you for joining us, man. Just wanted to grab this really fast. Of course, Sanders has to show, but he doesn't get the nod over Griffith. He does. And a big reason why is the Vance Joseph effect. What does Vance Joseph like to do? He likes to sugar up the A-gaps and bring pressure with linebackers. He likes to bring interior pressure with linebackers as pass rushers. What did Drew Sanders do specifically at Arkansas? He was an A-gap blitzer and got 9.5 sacks, mostly doing that. This dude is a legitimate blitzing linebacker coming from the second level. He does a really good job through the A and B gap as well. That is a big role in this Vance Joseph defense. It's going to take about 3 weeks for everybody to understand. That's what Drew Sanders' role is going to be. And I like Singleton. Don't get me wrong. I think he's going to play more of the coverage role this season because the other linebacker that the Broncos have that does a really good job as a blitzer, specifically in the A-gaps, is Josey freaking Jewell. Like, this guy's a good blitzer as well. He's a heady guy, scrapes through the trash really well. I put this in the article I was talking about with Vance Joseph defense and why it's going to be so exciting, according to Chuck Pagano, is because Vance Joseph likes to sugar up the A-gaps and bring linebacker pressure. He's got two guys that do it. And and Alex Singleton, let's not slouch on him. He does a good job shooting gaps too. May not tackle the greatest, but there's pieces in place here. Sanders is the guy. Jonas Griffiths, he's got a long ways to go to show it. I just think that if he does show enough growth, if they do want to move on, if they do trust enough in Drew Sanders, Josie Jewell could be on the outside looking in as a cap casualty more than a bad player that just getting replaced here. That was the point I want to get to.
And whatever his name was, I said that because it was a name that I can't remember, but he is the top tackle for next year.
Yeah,
Olu Fashanu.
Yep.
It wasn't because it doesn't matter. And yes, it was college, but this is a dude who allowed 7 pressures total last year. Thomas Nkoum got 4 of them.
Yeah.
And it was Fashanu's worst game by far. He got controlled in the run game. He got beat repeatedly in the passing game. Mm-hmm. So that matters. That factors in a lot. That was a big reason why a lot of draft analysts were confused as to why Nkoum went undrafted, because he whipped a guy who would have been one of the top 3 tackles this year had he been able to declare.
There's a very good possibility that if Olu Fashanu would have declared for this year's draft, he was eligible. He could have declared for this year. There was a good possibility. Olu Fashanu was a top 5 pick, the number 1 tackle on the board. There's a reason why he's considered the best tackle prospect to come out since Tristan Wirfs or even before then. This dude is legit as a pass rusher, as a pass protector, and as a run blocker as well.
And is this about Sanders and Griffith? Because if are asking if we're going to be tough against the run or just blitzing abilities in the linebacker room, Griffith doesn't bring either. No. The Broncos averaged almost a full 2 yards more to opposing offenses running the ball when Griffith was on the field. When he was on the field, the gap that he was assigned to averaged a full 3.5 yards, I think is what it was, more rushing yards through that gap than whenever anybody else was filling it.
Well, and
Jonas Griffiths wasn't good against the run. He's not a blitzer. He's a special teams guy that showed a little bit of promise in 2021 that didn't do anything off of that in 2022. Now to round out that we get cornerback.
I was going to say, let's get cornerback safety really fast.
There is a bit of a battle for that cornerback. I mean, it's going to be Damari Mathis and Patrick Stan 1 and 2. Sertan's probably going to follow people around. Riley Moss is going to have a role. Quan Williams is a starter in the nickel. But who's behind Williams? Jaquan McMillan, he's one of the guys that's under the radar for me. He had a good close to last year. He ended up going against Keenan Allen and Mike Williams and Josh Palmer, who's an underrated receiver, and did well. Wasn't great, but he's a guy who didn't play at all up to that point and was thrown to the wolves and handled himself. He's my favorite much better over Songbasi, but again, it's going to depend on how much they're going to grow and develop. And then safety, who's going to be that number 2 guy? Apparently that's actually a conversation that Kareem Jackson could still start. Should be Caden Stearns. If it's not Caden Stearns, then that's kind of a big concern there with his development, especially when it's him coming off an injury.
Yeah. To go back to the cornerback position here, what about Art Green, who played a lot of slot in Houston? Is he a guy that could potentially make the tail end of this roster? Undrafted free agent out of Houston?
No, he's extremely raw.
Yeah, he is very raw.
Extremely raw. And what technique he has, he doesn't use consistently. So I think practice squad is a spot for it. Spot for him.
We got Keith jumping in here again, and Keith's been getting a lot of run on this show, but we got to ask this. It's a good question. Where's Faion Hicks in this second-year player out of Wisconsin, I believe?
He's part of that battle, but I think there's a pecking order, and he's near the bottom for the backup nickel spot.
Asang Bassi. I know that this is your most favorite Denver Bronco of all time. Asang Bassi. Is he on the outside looking in?
I think he's the favorite right now because we've seen him on the field so much. Jaquan McMillan, again, despite the close of that season, he has to show that he can build off of it and not being handed the job like Jonas Griffith last year. Going back to that that conversation, because that's what happened. He was essentially handed the starting job by the coaching staff because of what flashes he had in 2021. We don't want to do that same thing with Jaquan McMillan. He's got to go out there in training camp and prove it.
Right. So I guess last question here on the cornerback room, because I think that this is a very pertinent question. The Broncos went out. They made him kind of a priority. I don't want to say a major priority. They gave him $2.5 million on a one-year contract. like a week into free agency. And Tremont Smith, former cornerback out of the Houston Texans, punt return guy, kick return guy, plays really well with the football in his hands, has a couple of interceptions. I believe he's taken for a touchdown. He also has some running back versatility. He has some NFL carries as a running back. Is this a player that is a tail end of the roster guy because of that special teams versatility, because he has that punt return ability that the Broncos have desperately been looking for the last seemingly since 10 years? It's literally been 10 years since they had Trenton Holiday. Holy cow. That's a crazy statement to say. 10 years since Trenton Holiday.
He's the favorite to be the returner, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Okay. What about a defensive role? Is he because he's a slot guy as well, inside outside versatility, but is that really the guy as like I don't want to say cornerback 5 because that's probably going to be
corner 6.
Corner 6. That's probably where he's going to land.
He's your returner. He's your special teams guy. Sure, you can play him in the slot, but you have your 3 guys inside, your 3 guys outside, 2 guys inside. And then you have Tremont Smith, who can kind of be a little bit of both, but you really don't want him on defense.
Yeah.
Real quick, just want to grab this. Thanks, Eric and Lance, for the conversation. Hope I didn't get too much under your skin. Go Broncos, go MHH and MHI. No, you didn't get under our skin a lot. It was a good conversation, and I enjoy it and the back and forth. And it's a common misconception that when I get loud and like all that, I'm getting angry. I'm not. Like, it's just the passion starts to flow and everything. And going back on this. So we had one bad game against Nkum and Nkum is a top undrafted prospect. It's the fact that 4 of the 7 pressures that he allowed all season long came against Nkum. And it wasn't the only thing that made Nkum a top prospect. Mm-hmm. He had a great season, but it was highlighted by the fact that he went against a guy who would have been a top 10 pick this year at the very least, one of the top 3 tackles taken at the very least, and just dominated him. That is why people were like, why did he go undrafted? Because he went out there and he dominated a guy who was going to be the top tackle next year. That's what I was getting at. It wasn't just that game, but it's a big reason for it. And it's a big part of it. It's a big piece of the puzzle that Nkum went out there and dominated this guy. And then he went out and dominated another tackle and another and another. He picked up like almost 50 total pressures last year and 11 sacks. Like, he had a great season that is highlighted by what he did against the top tackle.
Yeah. And I want to piggyback off of this because much like the Alex Forsyth conversation that we had, a guy that come off an injury, I don't think Nkum had the injury concerns. It's just a smaller school guy, played at Central Michigan. But there's a lot of very well-respected guys in the scouting community that had a lot of like high praise for Alex Forsyth as potentially a first-round pick and center number 1 in this class, even over John Michael Schmitz, guys like Joe Tippmann, Ricky Strong, like all those guys. There were people like Emery Hunt, Duke Manyweather, Joe Marino. Those guys organize offensive line masterminds. It's one of the biggest offensive line scouting and like training camps in the country. And they're like, Alex Forsyth is the dude. If it weren't for the injuries, he'd have been a top 64 player on everybody's board. Thomas Nkum is another one of those guys where I know a lot of guys, Joe Marino, Kyle Krabs, Jordan Reed from ESPN. I know that Todd McShay was a big fan of Thomas Nkum at Central Michigan. Why he went undrafted, I don't know. But I know that there were a lot of people that are very well respected in the scouting community that had Thomas Nkum as a top 150 player on their boards. Like, this is a high quality football player. He's mostly known for his run defense. He's not the twitchiest, bendiest guy in the world, but he plays with good pad leverage. He uses his length well. He extends his arms. He does a really good job, specifically in the running game, and he brings some speed to power conversion with his lower half. He's got a strong lower half, and he drives through offensive tackles as a pass rusher. There's a lot to like about Thomas Nkum. Just because he was undrafted free agent doesn't mean he can't turn into be something. How many times have the Broncos had an undrafted player that turned out to be something? Shaq Barrett, Chris Harris Jr., CJ, like, it happens. This is a guy that you really want to keep your eyes on. And I'm with Eric. I think if they do keep 6 edge defenders, Nkum is probably going to be that guy. He might even be edge number 5. With that, though, got to give a shout out to everybody who joined us. Albert Knopper's late in the chat. We got Michael Ronquillo showing up saying, great show tonight, Lance and Eric on the Dev Valley Deep Divers. Have a great weekend. Go Broncos and buck 'em. Todd Obstendorf in the chat as well. Thank you, Michael. We appreciate you, man. Have a great weekend. Keith as well. Harold Jean. We've got a couple of new players, a couple of new guys in here as well. I want to just give a quick shout out. The Boogmeister was saying he couldn't donate to us tonight. Man, it's great to have you guys donate and everything, but thank you for joining us. That's the big thing. Come back to us next time. Come back and enjoy the conversation. Get into it with everybody. It's great for the donations. We just love you guys being here and everything like that. That's the big thing. It's just to be able to talk Broncos football with everybody. So thank you all for joining us. Eric, what you got, man?
I'm just gonna say it's like we're not gonna be able to do our normal outro stuff. We have hit our time limit.
Yep.
We have just a matter of seconds to get out of here. So I hope you all have a wonderful weekend. Stay safe. Don't drink and drive. And yeah, we'll see you all next week.
Yep. We'll see you guys same time, same place. You all stay safe and take care. And as always, go Broncos. We'll see you guys later. Thanks.